Okay, so before you start your postcard project, there's a couple of things I want to go over with you as you build the postcard to make sure that you're as successful as possible at creating a professional level postcard. So the first thing I want to talk about is the document setup. Now I know you've went over this with lessons and we talked about it with a menu, but we're going to do it again so hopefully it really sticks in your brain. This is the very first step and it's really, really important that you get this right, because if you're going to send this off to a printer and you're going to pay thousands of dollars to mail these postcards to thousands of households, then you want to make sure that it is right from the get-go to save yourself time, money, and heartache. So we're going to go to File, New, Document. And again, because this is a print document, we're going to go to the Print section. And we're going to change this to inches just because that is a dimension that we are familiar with. And a typical postcard size, and the size for this project is 6 inches wide by 4 inches tall. Other common postcard sizes, 9x6, 5x7. So you can look up those common postcard sizes if you ever intend to send out a postcard, which you would think, some people think that that's not a thing that a lot of people do, but actually even small mom and pop businesses are using mailed postcards now to tell people about their grand opening, discounts and specials, etc., to try to generate business in their neighborhood. Okay, so this is not where we're going to just stop. We don't just choose the size. We also have to look at the margins and what is known as the bleed. So the margins, I would leave it at 5 inches if you were doing a bigger document, but because 6x4 is pretty small, I'm going to adjust the margins down to 0.25. And then for the bleed, we are going to adjust it to 1.125. That's a typical bleed setting for a kind of a handheld document size. And we are going to discuss the bleed settings because that's very important as we look at the document in the next step. So we'll go ahead and click Create. Oh, I forgot one thing. We don't need to choose facing pages because it's not left and right pages, but there are a front and back side to this postcard. So we need to change this to 2 pages here. So now we can hit Create and it is going to show us the first page. I can do Control or Command minus to zoom out so I can see the front and back, and again Control or Command plus to zoom in. All right, so when we are looking at this, let's talk about what we're looking at. The white area is called your artboard or your trim size. This is your document, the actual 6x4 size that will be your postcard. This inside line, that's sort of this purple pink, that's your margin. And that's helping you to make sure that your text and important parts of your images are inside the margin line so it doesn't crowd to the edge of the postcard, which kind of looks like an amateur did it. And it makes the postcard look cluttered if you put anything important outside of that margin. So my recommendation is to keep everything inside of that margin. Obviously your image can go all the way out, but you wouldn't put half of somebody's face in the margin because that's getting too close to the edge. So make sure that you are following that basic guideline. Now, if you have an absolute reason for having something outside of the margin, that's okay, but just make sure you really have a good justifiable reason. Now, the bleed is this area right here. It's this red line all the way into the trim line, which is indicated by the white area of the document. This area is a place that you want to still keep your image in, but it is intended to be cut off. So a postcard looks like the ink goes all the way to the edges. But if you've ever printed anything on your desktop printer, you'll know that you can't go to the edges because then that would spray ink into your printer and it would gunk it all up. The same is true even for big industrial printers. So what they do is they print these postcards, thousands of them on big sheets of paper, and then they actually trim them all, cut them down to size. So this gives them a little bit of leeway with that cutting so that they can trim off all of this bleed area right here, and it's going to look good and like the ink went all the way to the edge. So it just gives them a little bit of wiggle room. They also often, like with postcards, will keep them in a stack, and they'll use something called a guillotine where they actually chop off like thousands of edges all at once. And if you've ever tried to cut a stack of papers, you know that when you try to cut it evenly, the top one's great, but like the 10th one is really hard because it shifted with the way it was being squeezed. So that gives out a little bit of wiggle room too. So if it shifts, if that stack shifts a little bit, it's still going to look like the image. It's not going to look like white when they trim it. So make sure when you are designing yours that you're taking your image all the way to the outer edge of this red line so that I can see that you know how to do a bleed. So let's see an example of this in action. This is a former student's project, and she did a great job with her project and gave me permission to show this. So as you can see, she sent me her original InDesign file, and she sent me a screenshot of the finished product. This is very important that you send this to me for every single project you do in this class, because I don't have maybe the images you had, I don't have the fonts you had, and so this allows me to see what it should have looked like on your end so that I can make sure to grade you fairly. And I'll give you an example of this. So right here you can see this font is all capitals, so Colorado River is all capitals. But when I open her InDesign file, it's going to tell me that there are a bunch of fonts missing and I don't have the images, and it's saying that I don't have links to those. So I'm going to skip all of that because I don't want to add all of her fonts in here. If I added them for all of you guys, my system would get really bogged down. But now you can see this doesn't look the same. I don't know if I can zoom in. Let me see. This doesn't look the same as what she designed, but it's okay because I can grade based on what she designed. But had she not sent me this, I would think that she has an error here by not capitalizing Colorado River, which is a proper name. So this could have cost her points, but because she sent this to me, we're all good. So make sure you're always sending me a screenshot. The other way you can send a screenshot, just so you know, is you can go up to File and choose Export, and from the options you can choose JPEG or you can choose the Adobe PDF print. So I'll go ahead and hit cancel. All right, so you're probably saying, why doesn't hers look like mine with a dark background and all the guides? Where's the bleed? Where's the margin? Well, if you hit the W key on the keyboard and you just keep hitting it, it'll toggle back and forth between like a print preview and what it actually looks like. So she added a couple of things on here like this guide. So I'll go ahead and hide the document grid. And I actually will leave all of these guides for right now. But that's one way that you can kind of simplify and see what your final design is going to look like. So let's take this by just looking at one side at a time and give you a couple of tips. First of all, you don't have to have facing pages. That's going to allow this document to be perfectly, let's see how it's stacked now instead of being left to right. And then when it comes to this image, it is a high quality image. You can get high quality images from places like unsplash.com or Pexels or pixabay.com. And when you find a good photo, I just searched for Colorado, and this is in Ridgway, Colorado. You're going to download this document. You can also use your own photos. You can try to find large, high quality photos online through other venues. That's up to you. Just make sure that you're allowed to use those. If you're not allowed to use them, you can still use them for this project under fair use educational, but you can never like put it in your portfolio. So that's why I'd rather you download these, because then you can put this postcard in your portfolio and not have any copyright issues and running into any trouble with that. So with this postcard, remember that you are creating a tourism postcard, a postcard to send to people to get them to come to your location, like a town or a city, an event like this whitewater rafting, or even, activity event, like maybe it's a hot air balloon festival, and then town or city. Did I already say that? I think I already said that. So this is not a normal postcard where, you might get a postcard from a loved one who's in Paris, and this maybe has a picture of Paris, and then over here, this is all empty so they can write you a note. That's not that type of postcard. This postcard is trying to get people to attend this event or come to this location. So in that instance, you need to make sure, A, that you're having high quality photos, and make sure that when you're putting text on here, that text can live somewhere in this photo without impeding the photo. It would look weird if you put the text on top of like his face, or if there was no good empty spot to put the text, then maybe you need to either A, put a shape underneath that text, or B, maybe you need to find a different photo. Okay, so this one had a perfect empty area of the water that she could pop this in. It's simple. We don't have a ton of text on here because you're just trying to entice people when they're looking through their mail. They don't want to read a huge thing about this. You want to entice them with the image and a little bit of text about where it is. Okay. The other thing is we did talk about the bleed and taking it all the way to the edge, but I just wanted to show you what that looked like. So notice that she didn't just stop her photo at the trim area, the white postcard area. She actually took it all the way to the red line on all 4 sides. This is the proper way to work with bleed in anything you design and send to a professional printer. So this is what it should look like. Okay. So let's move on to the back of the postcard. Again, we still have a bleed, but now we have kind of 2 divided sides. The left side of your postcard is where you're going to put the enticing information about your event. This is something that should really get us to want to come. We shouldn't have to read 2 or 3 paragraphs. It should be easy to read, so it shouldn't be like dark blue text on a black background and it's really hard to read. And it's a little bit of enticement, and then a website or another way for us to get more information. And usually, like 99% of the time, that's going to be a website. Now, if it's a social media account, you can also put that on here. Notice also that there is an image. It can be an illustration, it can be a logo, it can be a photo, but it should be something that's enticing again. And I just keep saying this because I've had a couple students who create a postcard and it's literally black text that says come and visit Denver, and it's on a white background. It has no pictures, maybe they put a picture of Meow Wolf or the nightlife, or maybe they put pictures of hiking in Colorado, or put something on there that's enticing me to go to this. Don't make it boring, because if it's boring, then you just wasted all that time and money for it to not work, okay? So try to find something that relates to your event or your location, some kind of imagery and a little bit of teaser text to really get me to want to go, okay? Now the right side, now she put this placeholder for a stamp, which you absolutely can do. These 4 lines for people to write an address, again, you can absolutely do. And I love this cute little graphic that she put on there. Shows a nice little touch. Again, a great thing for her portfolio. But technically, you don't have to do this. If I sent this to a printer, I actually need it to be blank, because the printer is going to print the insignia, which is like a printed stamp on here, and they're actually going to put all the addresses of the people that I want to have each postcard mailed to. So actually, technically, you want this to be blank. But if you wanted it to look like a postcard for your portfolio, then you can definitely do this. But make sure that you, again, are thinking about it. Put a little style into this. Use your coordinated color scheme. Make sure it's evenly spaced and aligned like she did. Make sure they're not so close that nobody can write in that space. Make sure that you are paying attention to all those little details, because that is what a professional graphic designer needs to do. They need to make sure that this is functional, and not just functional, but also it looks good, but also function should come first. That's what I'm trying to say. Function before form, but then don't forget the form. It still needs to look good. So I think that's it. I think that's usually everything I run into. The worst thing is that this looks low quality and that it's boring and it doesn't entice me to do anything, or it doesn't make sense. So really be thoughtful about this, but that doesn't mean it has to be overcomplicated with a ton of text and a ton of photos. Just simple and effective.